Hey everybody! In this video, we are going to talk about box fighting setups. For the past 3 seasons now, Fortnite gameplay has strongly favored submachine gun sprays. SMGs shoot so fast now, the default playstyle has shifted from trying to skillfully take walls to trying to shoot your opponent through walls, hoping that a couple bullets will slide through your opponent's turbo build. Because of these powerful submachine guns, everyone has had to learn to tarp and tunnel away and play very defensively from inside a box. If you can't manage to shoot your opponent through walls with an SMG, you need to learn offensive box fighting setups. There are about 8 different positions where you can put yourself to set up against an enemy player who is being very defensive playing inside a box. All of these positions utilize right-hand peek to try and create an advantage in the fight. To explain that idea of right-hand peeks, let's get into the first offensive setup where you put yourself on the same vertical layer as your opponent in a box on a diagonal. From this position, you can edit through the left wall or the right wall. To find a right-hand peek, you'll always need to edit through the right wall. If I edit a peanut butter wall edit on the left wall, my opponent can see me very clearly with his third-person camera. I can try to hide behind cover like this, but my opponent can actually change their wall edit and still find a perfect maximum damage right-hand peek angle. This is hard to wrap your brain around. It looks like both of us have the same edit here, which in theory would give us both the same advantage. But in reality, because I chose to edit the left wall relative to my opponent, I have a left-hand peek and my opponent has a right-hand peek around this vertical line where our walls intersect. So from this first position where you put yourself on a diagonal inside a box, you always want to edit the wall on the right. One of the best things to do is edit a peanut butter, because from here I can see everything inside my opponent's box. If my opponent edits a peanut butter on that same right wall, now you should know that you have the advantage and you can find a shot as long as you back up into the far back left corner and change your peanut butter wall edit into anything else that will open up that angle. From this position, you can shoot your opponent's wall over the peanut butter, you can spray them and try to get damage through, or you can set up a phased. You can place a ramp or a cone inside that next tile space, damage the wall, change the wall edit as you run out, jump, and break the wall to phase inside. Moving clockwise, the second viable position to pressure a boxed opponent is from right in front of their box. From this position, you don't have as much cover. I don't think it's the best way to pressure an opponent if you don't know that you have an advantage already. You can play from on top of a cone and work with aggressive cone edits. All of these edits that I'm making here are intended to force my opponent to make a mistake. I can use these cone edits to block shots. I can use the cone edit to rebox to the left and now find a right-hand peek angle. Alternatively, I can place a ramp in this space and commit to a right-hand peek angle as I pressure that wall from safety. The problem with this ramp edit is that your opponent can pretty easily spray and replace it. You don't want to make a whole lot of different ramp edits here because you are forced more into the middle of the box. You can't really shoot your opponent from the right-hand peek and then escape to the left or the right. Both methods of setting up in this second position work just fine. If you're under a ramp though, make sure you don't edit the ramp too much. And if you are on top of a cone, use a more edit-heavy playstyle where you do make cone edits to try to bamboozle your opponent, encourage them to open up and edit, try to block shots. You can damage cancel if your edits are fast enough. And you obviously have to be ready at all moments to rebox, exit your box, and build a new one in a new tile space as your opponent breaks and replaces that cone. As we continue to move clockwise, we get to position 3. This is a really classic box fighting scenario where there is one box in between you and your opponent. This is a perfectly viable position to pressure your opponent's walls. I like to call this a mutual peanut butter scenario. For both players, the best option is to make a peanut butter wall edit and try to pressure the far wall across from that middle tile space. As you focus on shooting your opponent's wall, try to make sure that you stand up and sit down back into a crouch and try to shoot the top right corner of your opponent's peanut butter wall edit. That gives your opponent the smallest chance of hitting you. If you manage to take your opponent's wall, you can aim at the top right of that wall like this to make a very safe blueprint edit to create a wide opening from far away. The only problem with this setup is that it is not advantageous to either player. It's viable, but you do not have an advantage based on the angle that you are approaching your opponent's box. To create a better advantage, you'll need to move left into position 4, continuing to circle clockwise. From this position, you have a lot more space to work with, and you have a right-hand peek where you can very safely pressure your opponent's walls. From this position, my opponent cannot see me. It doesn't matter really what wall edit I choose. If my opponent tries to spray me, they will have to spray through 2 walls to shoot me. And even if they're successful, there are so many builds between me and the enemy player, it's very hard for them to close that distance. This position is by far the safest spot for you to pressure your opponent's wall when you are on the same vertical layer, but you will have to move around in fights. You won't always be able to find this position, and as you get more aggressive and you find advantages in a fight, you will need to move into those more aggressive setups to continue chasing your opponent. Now that we've talked about the 4 most viable setups on even ground, let's talk about playing from high ground. Generally, it is better to pressure your opponent's box from 1 layer above. If your opponent decides they want to climb for high ground and start a build fight, you are in a much better position to either block them or follow them if you're already standing 1 layer above. Continuing to move clockwise, we are going to rise up a layer and talk about the Arcrum Classic. This is a really good close range angle from high ground where you can pressure your opponent's wall. Just like the flat ground diagonal setup from this position, position 5, you can pressure your opponent's wall from a right-hand peek, and you can counter your opponent's peanut butter wall edits. As you pressure a wall, you need to be ready for your opponent to make a peanut butter edit and try to peek you. Many players still think that they have an advantage from this angle on low ground behind that peanut butter wall edit, but relative to your opponent, you are peeking through the right wall. On your opponent's end, they are peeking through their left wall. What this means is if you see a player making that peanut butter edit and you are in this position 5 spot, you can simply place a wall or reset this floor and cone, reposition yourself to the back left of your tile space, reopen the edit, and you should be able to shoot your opponent without them seeing you at all. The hardest thing about this position is figuring out where to aim your pickaxe to take the wall. I find it a lot easier to take the wall by shooting it. Continuing to move clockwise, we can put ourselves directly in front of our opponent's box, 1 layer above. From this position, I can make a door edit and pressure my opponent's cone and floor. I can make a peanut butter edit and do the same thing. You can even swing a couple times over a peanut butter or through a door and then change your wall edit into a window and continue breaking and replacing those pieces with 0 chance of your opponent shooting you. Many players from low ground like to open up their floor and cone edits and try to look for jump shots. In this situation, you are best off working with a peanut butter edit like this, trying to bait shots. You can reset the edit or simply move forward and backward. Once you hear your opponent shoot their shotgun, you can move forward, then aim straight down and create an advantage. This position is viable, but it is very aggressive. From such close range, you have to be concerned about your low ground opponent and the reach of their builds. You need to make sure that you are fully boxed up in this position, that you own the wall in front of you. You don't want your opponent double editing, getting a high wall and getting a window edit and coning you off. So make sure that you place all of the builds. A safer place to put yourself on high ground, continuing to move clockwise, is in this position 2 layers away from your opponent. It seems like not many players realize that you can actually replace walls from this far away. It's the same idea as a flat ground mutual peanut butter situation where you make blueprint edits. As you pressure and replace a wall, you will have to aim down below that wall in order to edit it. From this position, I can still get a cone inside my opponent's box. In fact, you can even get a cone from this position without ever opening your wall. All you have to do is wedge yourself under an edited cone or a ramp like this, aim at your opponent's box, and when they open an edit, you will place a cone inside. This position is very good when you use it in team game modes. If you're playing arena duos or trios, this is a very good spot to supplement how your teammates are pressuring the box. It gives you a very good way of spreading out your team's pressure so that you don't have to block each other, run into each other, and fumble over builds and edits. It gives you a great way of spreading out in order to pressure from multiple viable positions.
Opening.
100. 100. Knock.
Finally, we get into the last position, moving clockwise. This is position 8. This is by far the safest place to position yourself to pressure a boxed player's wall. If your opponent tries to spray you, there are a lot of builds that they have to get through. You have an excellent right-hand peek from this position. This position is great for team-based modes because your teammates can get a little bit more aggressive. They can get closer to the box. In the Arkham Classic, position 5, they can sit just one layer in front of you and pressure walls without worrying about blocking your shots or blocking your edits. If you see anyone setting up against your box like this, you just need to move. You need to get out of there, find a new position, because there is no chance of you hitting such a small target. And if your opponent peeks from here perfectly, you won't be able to see them at all. Now that we've talked about all the viable positions that give you good peeks in these kinds of fights, you need to learn how to flow through the different positions to find advantages during an active moving fight. Let's say you set up against your opponent from above on a diagonal. This is position 5. If you deal a little bit of damage, you might want to get more aggressive and press yourself into your opponent's wall. That's position 2. If your opponent makes a good edit and you need to retreat to heal, you will rebox out to the left and put yourself back into position 1 on this diagonal. From here, you can pressure your opponent over your peanut butter. You can counter their peanut butter. If you need to retreat again, you can simply edit yourself up, get back into position 5. If you need to retreat more, you can back up and get into position 8 to pressure your opponent from the safest possible position. If you drop down into position 2 and you force your opponent to retreat backwards, now you find yourself in position 3, the mutual peanut butter scenario. From here, you'll try to pressure and replace your opponent's walls and try to make large open blueprint edits. To practice all of these positions, I recommend using a guard in creative mode. You can give the guard a weapon that doesn't do very much damage, like a pump shotgun or a sniper. You can change the settings on these guards to give them more health and shield. You can also change their spawn and patrol distance to make sure that they don't move very far. Once that guard is up and running, you can start using these setups to figure out how to play from each angle. After practicing against bots, I would recommend practicing against real players and trying to look for these different positions in a game mode like realistic PvP. I love this map for practicing everything. It's 20 players in this huge sandbox deathmatch arena. You get so much practice per minute. There's a lot of chaos. It really improves your ability to track players through builds and not lose track of them. And it's a pretty big challenge trying to figure out how to apply all of these positions in all of that chaos of players building and editing on top of each other. And that map code is in the video description. If you guys have any questions about box fight positioning and how you can apply it to your gameplay, feel free to ask questions during my live streams at twitch.tv/Billy_Bicep. Thank you all for supporting the channel. Thank you for using code Billy-Bicep in the item shop, and I'll see you guys in the next one. GG.